Oh, hey, my name is Julie.
I'm Karen.
And this is Mr. Tilson's 4A class. Are you ready, kids?
Alright, we got SUSHI10, which is Identify Legal, Political, and Social Dimensions of Reconstruction. Compare and contrast presidential reconstruction with congressional reconstruction, including the significance of Lincoln's assassination and Johnson's impeachment.
Okay. So, much of the southern United States was destroyed during the Civil War. Farms and plantations, were burned down, and the crops were destroyed. Also, many people had Confederate money, which is now worthless, and the local governments were in dismay. The South needed to be rebuilt into this beautiful home. So, the rebuilding of the South after the Civil War is called Reconstruction. The Reconstruction lasted from 1865 to 1877. The purpose of the Reconstruction was to help the South become a part of the Union again. Federal troops occupied much of the South during the Reconstruction to ensure that the laws were followed and that another uprising did not occur. To punish the South or not? Well, many people wanted the South to be punished for trying to leave the Union. Other people, however, wanted to forgive the South and let the healing of the nations begin.
Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction. Abraham Lincoln wanted to be lenient to the South and make it easy for Southern states to rejoin the Union. He said that any Southerner who took an oath to the Union would be given a pardon. He also said that if 10% of the voters in a state supported the Union, then a state could be readmitted under Lincoln's plan. Any state that was readmitted must make slavery illegal as part of their constitution.
President Johnson. Where's President Johnson, Karen? Hey, President Johnson, what up, man? So President Lincoln was assassinated at the end of the Civil War, like this. However, and never had the chance to implement his Reconstruction plan. When Andrew Johnson became president, he was from the South and wanted to be even more lenient to the Confederate States than Lincoln. Congress, played by them, however, disagreed and began to pass harsher laws to the South.
You're missing something, Julie. You're missing something.
What am I missing?
Congress began pushing forward bills that favored their position, and Johnson vetoed each one. In addition to vetoing each Republican legislation that came to the White House for Johnson's signature, the president was also firing many Republicans from the executive offices they held under Lincoln's administration. To preserve the Republican influence in the executive branch, Congress passed the Tenure of Office Act over Johnson's veto in 1867. This law required the Senate approval before the president could remove a federal official or military commander from a position in the government. Johnson ignored that law and fired Republican Secretary of War Edwin Stanton from his post. Congress responded by impeaching Johnson for breaking the federal law, but ultimately failed to remove him from office by one vote. The impeachment hearings lasted months and sidetracked the more important Reconstruction efforts of the government. Because the Congress had a radical Republican majority, they were able to overturn any veto Johnson issued on proposed legislation. Rather than remove the president, the radical Republicans simply wanted him out his term in office. This arrangement ushered what is known as Congressional Reconstruction.
What, Karen? How did you know that? Oh, jeez.
Oh, Mr. Wilson's such a good teacher. B. Investigate the efforts of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen's Bureau, to support poor whites, former slaves, and American Indians. When was it established? The Freedmen's Bureau was established under the Freedmen's Bureau Bill on March 3, 1865. It was intended to last for the duration of the Civil War and for 1 year afterwards. However, it continued until July 1, 1869. The purpose of the Freedmen's Bureau was to perform relief work for both black, white, and white poor people in war-stricken areas in the South. The regulations of conditions of freedmen, black labor, the administration of justice in cases concerning black freedmen, the management of abandoned and confiscated property, including redistribution of abandoned lands to former slaves, and the support of education for freedmen. In reality, the Freedmen's Bureau was organized for the black vote in the South for the Republican Party.
Who did the Freedmen's Bureau help? The Freedmen's Bureau was created to aid and protect emancipated slave freedmen in the transition from a life of slavery to freedom. It also offered help to poor whites in the South.
Who created the Freedmen's Bureau? Freedmen's Bureau was created by Congress, organized by the War Department, and led by General Oliver O. Howard as its commissioner. The Freedmen's Bureau was therefore backed by military force and its original employees and agents for Civil War soldiers. The Freedmen's Bureau was supported by President Abraham Lincoln, moderate Republicans in Congress, and members of the abolitionist movement. The Freedmen's Bureau was massively understaffed and only employed 900 agents at its peak and lacked sufficient funds to meet their goals. However, there was additional support from teachers to establish some effective educational programs in charitable religious institutions. Who opposed the Freedmen's Bureau? It was opposed by organizations in the South such as the Ku Klux Klan, who intimidated agents. Resistance to the Bureau was also encouraged by President Andrew Johnson's administration, who were influenced by the lenient policies of the president. The result of this was that most of the land was confiscated from the Confederates, was eventually restored to original owners. The Freedmen's Bureau failed totally in establishing the freed slaves as landowners.
Problems with the Freedmen's Bureau. Some of the agents working for the Freedmen's Bureau were honest and honorable. Unfortunately, many were corrupt, purely working for their personal financial gain.
Describe the significance of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The 13th Amendment was adopted in 1865 and was very direct concerning the end of slavery in the United States. The amendment reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." Because the amendment abolished slavery, it made null the provision. It made null the provisions for slavery within the original Constitution. The overturned policies included a fugitive slave clause requiring runaway slaves to be returned to their owners, and the 3/5 compromise concerning the count of slaves as part of a state's population for representation in the Congress. The 3/5 compromise is basically saying that a slave is 3/5 of a person.
Okay. The 14th Amendment was adopted in 1868 and is a little more complex than the 13th Amendment, which bans slavery. There are two main provisions in the amendment. First, it declares that all people born or unnaturalized to the United States are citizens. As a Reconstruction Amendment, this provision meant that former slaves were indeed citizens of the United States. The second provision of the 14th Amendment requires that states protect the right of all United States citizens. States are expected to provide equal protection of the laws and due process of law. This particular amendment is still often used by civil rights activists to defend against discrimination. The 15th Amendment was adopted in 1869. The text of this amendment is also very brief. The amendment reads, "The right of a citizen of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude." So yes, Hello Kitty is yellow, but she can vote. The second section adds, "The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." The 15th Amendment did little to limit the effects of poll taxes, the grandfather clause, and literacy tests implemented in southern states to block blacks voting after Reconstruction ended. It was not until the 1950s and the 1960s that black codes were struck down by Supreme Court rulings and congressional legislation. An example of legislation, as we know, racial equality was not fully achieved during Reconstruction. For example, the black codes, how dare you, were enacted by many southern states immediately after the Civil War. These state-level laws were designed to regulate relations between white Southerners and newly freed slaves. Former recognizing some rights, such as legalized marriage, ownership of property, and limited access to the courts. Black codes denied blacks the rights to testify against whites, to serve on juries or in state militias, to vote, and to express legal concerns publicly. Also, the codes were an attempt by plantation owners to secure the labor supply lost as a result of the 13th Amendment by requiring all blacks to provide proof of employment or be forced to work for white landowners. Black codes enraged the Northern congressmen and the public who saw the laws as a reintroduction of slavery.
The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1866. It was originally a Confederate veterans club, but quickly became an organization closely associated with the worst forms of violence and intimidation. Initially, the Klan tried to scare blacks into compliance and keep them from voting. When this method did not work, Klan members attacked northern whites who came south. The racist organization also targeted southern whites who tried to support Reconstruction and blacks who were educated and participated in community affairs. Eventually, anyone who Klan members disliked could be attacked, beaten, or brutally murdered, often in front of family members. Resistance to the Klan was difficult due to a lack of weapons among blacks and control of the court system by the KKK sympathizers. Some states, notably Arkansas, Tennessee, and Texas, successfully broke up the Klan with special police forces. Eventually, the federal government used the Enforcement Acts to break up Klan activities. By 1872, Klan violence had greatly lessened as some Southern leaders urged the Klan to step down because of federal troops would stay in South as long as possible, as long as blacks needed protection from society. The Ku Klux Klan reemerged in earnest after Reconstruction and the federal soldiers were no longer in the South to provide protection.
Hey, Karen! Wait up! We have to finish. We have to talk about how the presidential election of 1876 impacted the Reconstruction movement. Wake up!